The city was a graveyard. Once a bustling metropolis, it now lay in ruins, a shadow of its former self. The streets, once filled with the sounds of life, were now eerily silent, save for the occasional whisper of the wind. Buildings stood skeletal against the bruised sky, their once proud facades now crumbling and broken. The cityscape was a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Nature had begun to reclaim its own. Trees and plants grew unchecked, their roots breaking through the asphalt and concrete, as if to remind humanity of its fleeting presence. Vines snaked through shattered windows, their emerald tendrils a stark contrast to the concrete decay. It was as if the earth itself was trying to heal the scars left by mankind. The green of the vines stood out vividly against the gray and brown of the decayed buildings, a small beacon of life in a sea of desolation. Lyra gripped her brother Kai's hand tightly, her knuckles white with tension. They had been through so much together, and the bond between them was unbreakable. As they moved through the desolate aisles of a once bustling grocery store, memories of better times flooded their minds. The laughter of children, the chatter of shoppers, all now replaced by an oppressive silence. Dust swirled in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced the boarded-up windows. The air was thick with it, making every breath a struggle. They were scavenging, as they always were, for scraps of a life long gone. Every day was a battle for survival, and every find, no matter how small, was a victory. The remnants of a long-gone life were scattered around them. Broken toys, tattered clothes, and empty cans told the story of those who had come before.
Anything?
Lyra's voice was barely a whisper, roughened by dust and years of unspoken fear. She knew the dangers that lurked in the shadows, and every sound could mean life or death. Kai shook his head, his eyes scanning the empty shelves. They had long been stripped bare, picked clean by survivors or reclaimed by time itself. The shelves, once filled with goods, now stood as empty sentinels, a testament to the desperation of those who had come before. They had long been stripped bare, picked clean by survivors or reclaimed by time itself. The once vibrant colors of packaging had faded, leaving only ghostly outlines. Dust and cobwebs covered the shelves, nature's way of reclaiming what was once hers. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. His hand tightened around a rusty pipe wrench, his constant companion in this world of the undead. It was both a tool and a weapon, a symbol of their struggle to survive. The wrench had seen them through countless dangers, its weight a comforting presence in his hand. It was a reminder that they were not helpless, that they could fight back.
We should go,
Kai murmured, his eyes darting towards the boarded-up storefront. The silence was deceptive, broken only by the wind whistling through the broken panes of glass high above. His eyes darted towards the boarded-up storefront. The silence was deceptive, broken only by the wind whistling through the broken panes of glass high above. The wind's mournful song was a constant reminder of the world they had lost. It was in this silence that danger lurked, waiting for the unwary. It was in this silence that danger lurked. Every shadow held a threat, every sound a potential enemy. They had to stay vigilant, for in this city of ghosts, the living were the true specters. A low groan, guttural and hungry, echoed from the street outside. Lyra's blood ran cold. It was a sound that had haunted her dreams for years, the harbinger of death that walked on two legs.
Kai,
She breathed, her voice barely audible. No need for further explanation. They both knew what that sound meant. The infected were drawn to sound, to the scent of living flesh, and they were close. Kai grabbed her hand, his eyes hardening with grim determination.
run.
They bolted towards the back of the store, their footsteps loud in the suffocating silence. A heavy thud against the boarded-up storefront sent a tremor through the floor, followed by the splintering of wood. The infected were breaking in. Lyra and Kai scrambled through a shattered back window, shards of glass biting into their skin. They didn't dare to look back. The only thing that mattered was survival, and that meant outrunning death itself. The bunker was a sanctuary of sorts. It was a place where the remnants of humanity could find a semblance of safety, a fragile barrier against the chaos that reigned outside. Damp, cramped, and smelling faintly of mildew, but safe. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a constant reminder of the world they had lost. Thick concrete walls kept the horrors of the outside world at bay. For now. The walls, though sturdy, seemed to pulse with the weight of the world outside, a world that had become unrecognizable. Lyra huddled beside a flickering lantern, its dim light dancing across the walls. The shadows it cast were both a comfort and a reminder of the darkness that loomed just beyond their sanctuary. Kai was fiddling with a battered radio, his brow furrowed in concentration. The radio was their only link to the outside world, a fragile thread connecting them to the hope of other survivors. It was a ritual they performed every night, a desperate attempt to cling to the hope that there was still something left of the world they once knew. Each night, they would sit in silence, waiting for a sign, a voice, anything that would break the monotony of static. A burst of static, then a voice. It was faint, crackling, but undeniably human. The sound of another person, even distorted by static, was a lifeline in the sea of silence that surrounded them. A burst of static, then a voice. The static was a constant companion, a reminder of the broken world outside, but the voice was a beacon of hope, faint, crackling, but undeniably human. The voice was a reminder that they were not alone, that there were others out there, fighting to survive just as they were. Lyra held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the darkness that surrounded them.
This is Sector 12, Safe Haven, survivors. The words were fragmented, broken by static, but they were enough to ignite a spark of hope.
The voice faded, swallowed once more by the static, but those few words were enough. They were a promise, a beacon in the darkness. But those few words were enough. They were a lifeline, a whisper of possibility in the deafening silence of their despair. Hope, fragile and flickering like the lantern light, sparked within them. It was a small flame, but it was enough to keep the darkness at bay.
Sector 12. The words were a mantra, a promise of safety and survival.
Lyra whispered, tracing the words on the dusty floor with her finger. The act was a ritual, a way to make the hope tangible, to give it form. It was a lifeline, a whisper of possibility in the deafening silence of their despair. The hope was fragile, but it was enough to keep them going. In the deafening silence of their despair, the world outside was a wasteland, a desolate reminder of what had been lost. But inside the bunker, there was a glimmer of hope, and they would cling to it with everything they had. The hope was a fragile thread, but it was enough to keep them connected, to keep them fighting for another day. The journey was fraught with danger. Days bled into nights, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. They scavenged for food, their bodies weary, their minds constantly on alert for the telltale signs of the infected. They avoided the main roads, sticking to the shadows, moving through deserted suburbs and overgrown fields. The world was a graveyard of memories, haunted by the ghosts of who they once were.
We'll have to go through the city.
One day, a horde, thousands strong, a river of decaying flesh stretching as far as the eye could see. They had to detour, their carefully planned route gone. It was the most dangerous path, but the only option left to them. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs. The city. Their nightmare began there. Now, they had no choice but to face it again. Sector 12, a beacon of light in the darkness. High walls manned by guards with eyes that had seen too much. Lyra and Kai approached cautiously, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and a flicker of hesitant hope. The horde was upon them, a wave of moans and snarls, a symphony of death. They were so close to safety, so close to achieving the impossible.
Help us!
Lyra screamed, her voice raw with desperation. The gates began to close. No, not like this, not when they were so close. A hand reached down, strong and calloused. Lyra felt herself being pulled up, hauled over the wall just as the horde crashed against the metal gates. They were safe, for now, but the sanctuary, with its strict rules and haunted eyes, felt more like a cage than a haven. And the faces that greeted them, while human, held a coldness that chilled Lyra to her core. The walls of Sector 12 were high, built to keep the horrors out. These walls, towering and imposing, were a testament to the desperation and fear that had gripped humanity. They were constructed hastily, with whatever materials could be scavenged, and they stood as a grim reminder of the world that once was. But they also kept something else in fear. The fear was palpable, a living, breathing entity that seemed to seep into every corner of the sector. It was in the eyes of the people, in their hurried movements, and in the way they spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid that even their voices might attract danger. Lyra could taste it in the air, a tangible thing. It was a bitter, acrid taste that clung to the back of her throat, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Every breath she took was filled with the scent of decay and despair, mingling with the faint, lingering hope that somehow they would survive. The people here, they were alive, but something within them had died. Their eyes, once bright with dreams and aspirations, were now hollow and vacant. They moved like shadows, going through the motions of survival without truly living. The spark that made them human seemed to have been extinguished, leaving behind only the shell of what they once were. She sat with Kai in a corner of the communal barracks, a rough blanket pulled tight around their shoulders. The barracks were a makeshift refuge, a place where survivors could huddle together for warmth and a semblance of safety. The blanket, though threadbare and worn, was a small comfort in a world that had become increasingly harsh and unforgiving. The sounds of the sanctuary, the muffled coughs and hushed whispers, were a stark contrast to the silence they were accustomed to. In the outside world, silence was a necessity, a means of avoiding detection by the horrors that roamed the land. But here, within the walls of Sector 12, the sounds of human life, however muted, were a reminder that they were not alone.
It's not what we expected. The words hung in the air, heavy with disappointment and resignation. They had hoped for a sanctuary, a place where they could rebuild and find some semblance of normalcy. But Sector 12 was far from the haven they had envisioned.
Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the wall across from them. It was true. Sector 12 wasn't the haven they had hoped for. The walls that were meant to protect them also served as a constant reminder of their confinement. The sector was a place of shadows and secrets, where trust was a rare commodity. It was a place of whispers and suspicion, where survival came at a cost. Every interaction was tinged with an undercurrent of mistrust, and alliances were fragile and fleeting. The constant threat of betrayal loomed over them, making it difficult to form genuine connections. But even in the heart of this fragile sanctuary, hope remained. A single ember refusing to be extinguished. It was a small, flickering light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the bleakest of times, there was still a chance for something better. This hope was what kept them going, what gave them the strength to face each new day. They were alive. They were together. In a world that had been torn apart, their bond was a source of strength and comfort. They had each other, and that was enough to keep the darkness at bay, at least for a little while. And as long as they had each other, they could face whatever this new world threw at them. Together, they were stronger, more resilient. They had faced countless challenges and had come out the other side, scarred but unbroken. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it, side by side. The fight for survival wasn't over, not by a long shot. Every day brought new dangers and new challenges, but they were determined to keep going. They scavenged for supplies, fought off threats, and did whatever it took to stay alive. Their resilience was a testament to the indomitable human spirit. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to find a new beginning amidst the ashes. The world had been devastated, but it wasn't completely devoid of hope. Green shoots were beginning to emerge from the ruins, a sign that life, in some form, was returning. The sunrise over the destroyed city was a symbol of renewal, a promise that even in the darkest times, there was still a glimmer of hope for a brighter future.